Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Ayman Siksek with the top economic reports. On today's show, focus on the global oil industry, dramatic shifts in prices of oil as Japan slips into recession, and Israeli high-tech mogul Yossi Hollander discusses his new film, Pump, on the American oil industry. But first, the headlines. Shares fell and oil prices slid on Monday after data showed Japan had slipped into recession, raising concerns about global growth. The data had pushed the yen to a 7-year low against the dollar, but as Tokyo stocks fell, the Japanese currency rebounded. Japan's economy suddenly slipped into recession in the third quarter, setting the stage for Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to delay an unpopular hike in sales tax and call a snap election halfway through his term. Japan's gross domestic product fell at an annual 1.6% pace in July through September, after it plunged 7.3% in the second quarter. The world's third largest economy had been forecast to rebound by 2.1% in the third quarter, but consumption and exports remained weak, saddling companies with huge inventories to work off.
We're not even close to reaching the 2% inflation target set by the Bank of Japan, so we are still midway through, and the deflationary mindset has still not been eradicated.
The International Monetary Fund's managing director, Christine Lagarde, said on Sunday that her agency will monitor implementation of a series of measures agreed upon by G20 leaders to boost their economies. The group of 20 leading economies on Sunday signed off on a package of measures to add an extra 2.1 percentage points to global growth by promoting infrastructure investment and trade over 5 years. Progress will be reviewed by the IMF and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD.
Certainly the thing that comes out loud and clear is the focus on growth, the clear objective of the 2% that has been slightly exceeded, the process by which we will be following through and monitoring implementation going forward.
China and Australia have sealed a major free trade agreement as Chinese President Xi Jinping made a rare address to Parliament in Canberra. The deal, the result of a decade of talks, will open up markets worth billions of dollars, Canberra says, by giving Australian dairy farmers, winemakers and other sectors tariff-free access to the huge Chinese markets within a few years. Mr. Xi is on a state visit to Australia following the G20 summit. In his speech to Parliament, he vowed China would pursue peaceful development with Australia and other nations. Also in China, international buyers snapped up Chinese stocks on Monday at the debut of an exchange link that allows Hong Kong and Shanghai investors to trade shares on each other's stock markets. This marks a major step towards opening China's tightly controlled capital markets. The so-called Stock Connect scheme gives foreign and Chinese retail investors unprecedented access to the two exchanges, with some analysts saying this could eventually lead to the creation of the world's third largest stock exchange. Oil prices around the world have dropped in recent months, and the changes have had far-reaching impacts on industries from air travel to alternative energy. Here's a closer look at the oil economy.
Price of oil has been falling, hitting a 3-year low last week of just over $77 per barrel. The price has dropped by 25% since the high of $115 per barrel in June. U.S. consumers spent $40 billion less in October than they did at the year's peak in June, a 10% drop. The savings are allowing for spending to grow in other areas, a bright point looking forward to the holiday season.
Well, the lower income households, they spend a large proportion of their overall outlays on gasoline. So when you live paycheck to paycheck and you get a little bit of pump price relief, that gives you a little more spending power.
The decline in prices has far-reaching effects. From farmers using petroleum products to mail carriers, many are reaping the benefits. The airline industry may be affected the most. The Wall Street Journal reports that according to the trade group Airlines for America, every penny per gallon shift up or down is equal to a shift of $190 million in yearly fuel expenses. On the flip side, rail companies who find more customers when oil prices boom are feeling the pinch. The reasons for the slump in gas prices include excess supply hitting the market from North American shale, which may slow down as fuel prices fall, as well as low demand from China and Europe. But not everyone is feeling the pressure at the pump subside, though. In Israel, consumers only saw a small decline in price of a few cents, a policy decision based on taxes and international prices. In Brazil, the price of gas has actually gone up to make up for the lack of price hike, just 50% of the actual price rise over the last 5 years. This move is aimed at stabilizing the cash situation of national gas company Petrobras.
It is a shame that we are seeing this series of increases now straight after the re-election of our president. Energy has increased by almost 20%, gasoline by 3%.
Notably, as oil impacts economies across the globe, hype surrounding solar, which is often tied to high prices of fossil fuels, has not dwindled in this drop. This may indicate that solar has matured in its own right as oil prices rise and fall.
Well, Yossi Hollander is one of the founding fathers of Israel's high-tech industry. He's involved in research, policy, and investments in the field of energy around the world. The new documentary Pump, which Hollander produced, claims that fuel prices could be reduced to $2 a gallon. I-24 News economy presenter Binyamin Tjong-Alvares met Hollander for a talk here at I-24 News studios. Let's have a look.
Joining us now is Yossi Hollander, chairman of the Israel Institute for Economic Planning and producer of a new documentary on the United States addiction to oil, Pump. Can we go cold turkey on the black gold? Mr. Hollander, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, you're an entrepreneur and an investor in the high-tech sector. You had a company named New Dimension Software. You sold for about $650 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
What inspired you to go into the field of oil dependency and oil alternatives?
Well, after I made a lot of money, relatively, of course, I decided that I want to devote most of my time and money to philanthropy. And I dealt with a few subjects, not just energy, but all of them kind of met together in the issue of oil. Because if you care about something, whether it's about the security of the state of Israel, or whether it's poverty worldwide, or the air pollution, they all meet at the same juncture, and that's oil.
Interesting. So why did you decide to produce Pump?
So we have a foundation in the United States called the Fuel Freedom Foundation with the goal of reducing the price of oil to $50 a barrel. That's half of 100. Okay.
We're on the way there, right?
Well, I think that might be temporary right now, but we can do it permanently for 50 or lower, and we want to do it within 5 or 10 years. And part of the issue was to explaining to people how this could be done, how we can actually do it today.
Okay, where has the movie been screened so far, and how have the reactions been?
So the movie started only in the U.S., and we opened in L.A. and in New York and the MoMA, and we screened it already in about 40 cities throughout the U.S. The reaction has been, I think, has been very, very positive. I mean, it's not exactly a blockbuster like Spider-Man, etc. But everywhere where we've been, people watched it, and where we had Q&As, question and answers, people never left.
Right.
I mean, people are passionate. The movie moves people and actually shows you the way. It's not just a movie negative. It's a movie about our addiction to oil and how we've been taken for a ride.
The facts of it, the reality behind it.
The reality of it, but also how we can get out of it. It's a hopeful movie. It's a happy movie.
On that note, I mean, how do you foresee the world casting off its oil dependency? I mean, everything is related to oil. What will the world look like when it actually does?
I think the issue is that we're looking at it because we don't have a choice. When we go to the supermarket and you buy cereal, there's a lot of choice usually. And nobody tells us which cereal to buy, but they tell us which fuel to put in our tank.
No, we have ethanol in Brazil, and we have,
methanol, and we have natural gas, and we have the thing we can do. We can do garbage to methanol, and we can do so many things. But just they're not allowed to get to the pump. So it's like everybody could prepare the food, but you can never buy it in a supermarket, then you wouldn't have it, okay? So we have a lot of types of foods that can be made from various sources, like from natural gas, for example, in Israel. We can make methanol from natural gas. We can make compressed natural gas for trucks from our natural gas. We can really be in Israel, for example, could be independent very quickly.
But how are we going to do it?
The key is to convert the current cars to run on other fuels. And what we found out, and we show in the movie, that most cars in the world can be converted today to run on other liquid fuels like ethanol and methanol at less than $300. Some of them just by a software switch. And it's only blocked by regulators in every country. Whether it's Israel, the United States, the regulators say, no, don't touch this, don't do the
These
car, don't
regulators
leave
are
it.
paid by the oil industry, perhaps?
I don't know if it's paid. I think it's more don't want to take any risks. Or perhaps we haven't done it before.
But we are taking risks because if you look at the global climate, I mean,
yes, but
things are not so great, right?
But that's not your job.
Right.
Their job is not to look after the global climate. Their job is to make sure that everybody who fills gas in the United States or in Israel doesn't do something bad to his car.
Right.
For example, they don't care if we send soldiers to die in various places or we fight here with the Hamas, etc. That's a different budget. That's not the department.
Right.
Nobody's kind of taking an overall look and say, wait a second, the price of not doing this conversion or the price of not doing this may be too high. And I think once people start taking a look right now, the change is happening.
Now, there are various options, of course, in terms of substitutes to oil. Which one do you, does every place have a different option, a different substitute that is ideal, or do you foresee one being stronger?
There's not such a thing as ideal, because at any point in time, when something gets cheaper, then the other side says, wait a second, I want to sell there, and I'll figure out a way to do it cheaper. Once we'll open the market, we'll see a lot of competition, including from fuels that we don't even see today. Okay, and therefore, I don't want to say this fuel is better. There's no doubt that Israel, with its sources of natural gas, it's better making here natural gas to methanol than making corn to ethanol in Israel.
Right.
So, of course, each country has maybe a better solution for its environment, but it's not the only solution. The key is to have choice at the pump so they can compete on the price.
Okay. Well, since you're already here, as one of the grandfathers, in my mind anyways, excuse my use of the word grandfather, but of the Israeli high-tech sector, certainly one of the tycoons, if you want. Where do you see the Israeli high-tech sector going?
So in that specific area?
Not necessarily, just in general.
Oh, I think it's a very healthy sector. It has a growth limitation, of course, because it can't grow to be 200% of the economy, okay?
Right.
But it is already a pretty large chunk of the economy. But I think the world in general is still moving to a technology world. But I think it's going to expand beyond just software and electronics. I think it's going to expand into cars. I think it's going to expand in chemistry, into biochemistry, all those areas, medicine. I think we're just going to see an expansion of the technology sector in Israel into different sectors. And they're all interrelated these days. There's no such a thing as pure sector anymore.
Now, if the Prime Minister of Israel were to come to you tomorrow and say, Mr. Hollander, what are the 3 most important actions that we should take to boost the Israeli economy? What would you say they would be?
Open all the cars in Israel to be converted to any fuel people want. Mandating all car manufacturers that every new car will have to be running flex fuel, running on ethanol or methanol or gasoline, and also starting producing methanol from natural gas in Israel.
Okay, well, that sounds like a very, very strong answer to me.
Very
Mr.
simple.
Yossi Hollander, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now for a discussion of other reports from around the world in Media Watch with Daniel Roth. Daniel, thank you for joining us today.
How's it going?
So we've been discussing oil extensively today, and it can be a very controversial issue. You have a few good examples for us.
Absolutely. The Huffington Post actually had this report. The president of the Sioux Rosebud Nation in Dakota, in the center of the United States, said that building the Keystone Pipeline would be like an act of war. If Congress passes this, he will see it as an act of war, because this Keystone Pipeline, which is a very dangerous prospect, carrying oil 1,600 plus miles from Canada, from Alberta, down to Texas, would be going through reserve land.
And this is a project that's been delayed before, am I right?
It's been delayed, and the truth is that probably President Obama is going to veto it. But this is what this president of this tribe said. This will be an act of war. That's how serious it is. It's a very, very big deal. Another serious story from Bloomberg Bloomberg. Apparently, the world of investors sees Russia as the biggest wild card, the biggest unknown right now. And there's a few reasons for this. Number one is... right now, 52% of the people polled said that the biggest deal is Ukraine crisis. Mm-hmm. This is the biggest deal in the world. And the drop in oil prices will actually cause Russia to become unpredictable, because almost half of Russia's economy, their budget revenue, relies on selling oil to places like Europe. And if oil prices continue to drop, we'll see Russia having less and less to lose.
A bit of a grim note there to end with, but Daniel Roth, thank you so much for that today.
Thank you.
And with that, that's a wrap for us on the Economy Magazine today, your daily source for economic and financial reports on I-24 News. I'm Ayman Siksak. Be sure to send us your comments via the feedback link on our page at i24news.tv. And stay tuned for more on the economy tomorrow.